these individuals. I'm also on the Veterans Committee, and I have several bills there. Last year, we were able to present a Veterans Home Bill. Strong supporter for veterans. We're a military family here, and that passed. It really surprised me that we were able to get that through, and I'm glad to know it's on the way. I have a bill coming Monday that doesn't mean a lot. 1 minute. An amendment to our restricted driver's license. It came to me from several people. We'd like to add the ability for individuals who are 15 years of age with a restricted license to also be able to drive their car to church. We feel like if they're skilled enough to go to work and to school, we'd like that, and that affects us in our family. So I'm enjoying this session much more than last year, and I think we're getting some things done that are going to help people. Thank you.
I'll go next. It seems like I'm Representative Rui Xu. I represent the 25th House District, which is Northeast Johnson County, Mission, Westwood, Fairway, Roland Park, up in that area. It seems like I am the grizzled veteran at 2 terms in compared to the rest of this group. So I'll try to impart that wisdom here. So the bulk of my time in the last couple of weeks has been dealing with this APICS bill that you guys might have been hearing about in the news. If you don't know what it is, it's a rather large incentive program to try to draw in mega projects in Kansas. The definition of a mega project is over $1 billion in investment. So these are really, really, really big projects. A lot of these are happening nowadays across the country because, as we're experiencing supply chain issues, a lot of companies here in the States want to shorten their supply chains a little bit. So whereas before manufacturers were in China or Japan, maybe they want to bring them back to the States and provide the jobs here, and also provides a little bit more certainty with the supply chain. So that's kind of what we're looking at. Just kind of overall, philosophically, I am generally kind of skeptical of these kinds of deals. But the more I learned, the more I was kind of assuaged that I think this could be a really, really good thing for Kansas and really transformative. I kind of think of my time in the legislature, I try to look super long term, right? How do we better position Kansas and our reputation in the national conversation? And I think over the last 10, 15 years, that reputation has been rather bad. And that kind of leads to young people leaving the state. And I think this project can also do a lot to keep our KU and K-State and our other university graduates here. So I was strongly supportive of this bill in the end. I don't love every portion of it. But I am really excited about it. And just for a little bit of additional context, in terms of mega projects, we have tried to recruit 11 in the previous, 6, 7 years, and we have gotten 0 of them. And so that kind of speaks to why this type of expanded incentive program was necessary. 1 minute left, just kind of quickly. I'm the ranking Democrat on financial institutions. We've been looking at a lot of housing issues. It's a big issue in both rural and urban Kansas. There's just not very many new houses being built for a variety of reasons. We're looking at that this year. Agriculture has been pretty slow. I think the most exciting testimony has been kind of about what we can do to save the ornate box turtle. There are declining populations for a variety of reasons, mostly human cause, but there is kind of a black market being created for them. People in Asian countries are buying them for their gardens, and so people in Kansas are kind of collecting them and shipping them overseas. And so we're just kind of trying to tighten that up a little bit. One last quick thing that I'm very, very excited about next week in Fed and State, which Joel is on, so she has to vote for it. We're having a hearing on in the Asian American Affairs Commission. It's a bill that I've created. We already have an African American Affairs Commission. We have a Hispanic American Affairs Commission. And so this would just create an Asian American one alongside that. So I'm really excited to move forward with that.
I think that means it's my turn. Thank you, everybody. And thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to have a forum with so many people. We've missed our, at least in my district, our in-person town halls and so forth. I'm Representative Mari-Lynn Poskin, and I represent the 20th district in Kansas, which is state line to Metcalf. It straddles 435 from about 99th Street to 132nd. When I ran on 3 issues that were incredibly important to me. The first is public education. The second was strong and healthy communities. And the third was economic development and opportunities for our young families. I'm the mother of 7 of a blended family, and 6 of them have left the state. So I really appreciate the work that we've done around that. I currently serve on 4 committees. I'm on financial institutions and rural development with Representative Xu. And we have also, in addition to the housing issues, looked at some financial highways for new and interesting types of business to bring to Kansas. I'm on the education committee, and that one is near and dear to my heart. One of the things that I want to talk about really quickly in education is that when we looked at the bills that were presented last year and this year, I found very few bills that were supportive of teachers. And so within the last couple of weeks and some additional work, particularly thank you to Joella for taking up one of the issues I didn't have time to look at. There are at least 4 very supportive bills for teachers. One of them is House Bill 2626, which doubles the Kansas Teacher Service Scholarship appropriations. And that's a scholarship that goes to teacher ed, and those teachers commit to work in Kansas. We had 36 bipartisan co-sponsors of that bill, including every representative who's here. House Bill 2627 is a new scholarship program based on the characteristics of every year's Teacher of the Year. I'll let you take a look at that. We've got 2639 that changes some CAPER rules so that retired teachers can return to substitute more quickly. And then 2671, which restores due process to teachers. And also I introduced a bill in elections that hasn't come up yet, but it requires attribution of a paid for by statement on school board races and community college races. I'm gonna have to hurry up. I'm also serving on veterans and military with Representative Johnson. We had a wonderful week with veterans in the Capitol this week. And I'm also the ranking on transportation and public safety budget. That really ties in well to our congressional representation, where Congresswoman Sharice Davids is vice chair of the transportation. We'll see supply chain and transportation and public safety issues being very important to our area. And I think that will be it for now. And I can't wait to weigh in on the next questions. Thank you.
Right. I misspoke. I said gallery view would be the best experience. It's speaker view. You're just going to see our legislators and the moderator and our timekeeper that way. I apologize. Zoom is always changing on me. We're going to blame Zoom, not me. So I have our first question. What do you think about the potential court challenges, both state and federal courts, to the Ad Astra 2 map? The Ad Astra 2 map will face, and that the state will have to defend.
I don't think it really matters what we think as it goes to the courts. You know, again, it's out of our hands at this point. I thought the veto override and the whole process, honestly, was very disappointing. My whole goal is to not make politics feel bad for my constituents, and just kind of the stories around, you know, there are a couple lone holdout no's, and there are like these deals going on to try to get them to flip, which happens with every kinds of one of these votes. I don't think it feels good. You know, if you vote no, that's fine. If you vote yes, that's fine. But to use redistricting, which is kind of one of the most important things as leverage to get what you want, and that didn't feel good to me. So other than that, yeah, I don't know which way it's going to stand. You know, I think most of us here know that the Alabama court case at the federal level didn't go well. So that's maybe why we see kind of a state court challenge. But other than that, yeah, I don't know which way it's going to go at this point.
I agree, and I personally support nonpartisan commissions working to help draw these maps, but that's unfortunately not the process that we used here in Kansas. So it did become much more political, and I just can't see how we would draw Lawrence out of Douglas County into the 1st district. And I feel that the current map grossly separates important communities of interest, but Representative Xu is right. That's going to be out of our hands now. And the courts will have to decide whether or not these are politically and racially gerrymandered maps, which I personally think they are.
I'll go next. And I will tell you that one of the issues that I ran on was breaking the supermajority. When I ran in 2020, we were only one House seat away from doing that. And I was a Republican for 35 years, have been a Democrat for 2. I don't have a problem with there being more Republicans than there are Democrats, but I get concerned when there's a supermajority and they are able to just crush things like a gerrymandered map through the process and then make all the rules for how it's done. And we heard testimony in just a few short days from people all over the state who voiced an opinion to keep Johnson County and Wyandotte counties together. And I think it's important to note what Representative Sutton pointed out on the floor, and that is the information about the census data came out after those hearings. So the folks like myself and people who live in Johnson County, when we change our verbiage to say to keep the core of the Kansas City metro area together, and some people pounced on us for agreeing that we would have to slice off some of either county. That's a result of the fact that the data came out after. But I think the sentiment that was expressed throughout the state was to keep the core of the Kansas City metro area together for the communities of interest, economic, racial, and so forth. So my hope is that when it goes to court, that they will take a look at the process, take a look at the overwhelming testimony from the citizens of the state of Kansas as to how those maps should be drawn. And it's important to note out that the original Ad Astra map even broke apart tribal nations, and again, putting Lawrence in with the Colorado bordering counties just seems ridiculous. So I guess I'm just going to agree with the colleagues.
Okay, I guess I am very comfortable with the map that we voted for, looking at the procedures that went through. I attended several of the hearings to see what was going to be drawn. I think people were given an incredible opportunity to respond in these meetings. Sometimes people don't take advantage of that. What I have seen is we keep hearing this issue that we can't split Wyandotte and Johnson County. That's not an option because of the sheer numbers. Wyandotte and Johnson County can't be together wholly. One or the other is going to have to be split. The second thing is we've had some very negative issues out of a few people in Wyandotte County, but I grew up in Wyandotte County, cut my teeth there in politics. I live a quarter of a mile from Wyandotte County, and I'm telling you, there are a lot of people who do not care that their county has been split up, especially in the Northwest quadrant in that region. And they are very happy to see that they have an opportunity to be in another district. So not everybody in Wyandotte County is dissatisfied. I don't know. This is my first ever situation with redistricting. I can tell you, I have been told all kinds of things about my 38th district. One thing's for sure, it's not going to be the same. I may very well end up in parts of Wyandotte County. Who knows? And so we're going to have to deal with that. But in this particular situation, I think it's going to go to the courts. I mean, that's where it's going to go, and I need to move on. So that's it.
Okay, our next question is, what is your sense that the so-called student empowerment accounts will pass into law? What about other voucher-like programs do you think have a chance of passing?
I'm happy to hop in there. I serve on the K-12 Education Budget Committee. We have heard another education savings account bill, voucher bill this year, HB 2550, and last year we had HB 2119. So both are still out there. They're very similar bills, and it does take a lot of public taxpayer dollars that would be transferred into these accounts and go into private funding, private education. And I personally believe that public tax dollars should be used for public education. The biggest concerns I have are the inability for us to really make sure there isn't a lot of fraud, and we have no way. These can be used at accredited or non-accredited schools, so we won't know if students are actually achieving at higher levels or having a successful experience. And also, these other schools do not have to take all students. They can deny enrollment to anyone for any reason. And I think that there's going to be a push. I think we'll work that bill. I think we'll pass it out of committee. I will not be supporting it, but I do think a lot of, especially rural and smaller town legislators, understand the importance of their community and neighborhood school. That's a huge driver for their schools or for their towns. And I think we'll manage to gavel out this session without diverting a whole bunch. I mean, it's like if they estimate in our on our fiscal note, I think it's about $68 million a year could go, or 58 or 68 million a year could be diverted from the state general fund into these education savings accounts. And once that money makes it into an education savings account, even if the student would return to their public school, there is no mechanism for those dollars to ever return to the state general fund. So once it's in there, it's there. Once a student has qualified for an education savings account, they're in for the rest of their school career, whether they go to school at a public or a private. So again, I have big concerns with this, but I am hearing from parents and educators in my district and across the state. People are paying attention, and we need to continue to hear from you all.
I guess I would be the opposite opinion. One of my great concerns as a teacher, I'm not teaching at this point. I retired after I was elected to the state just last December, is we're failing our kids in certain areas. Now, clearly my district, the DeSoto, the Basser, Linwood, the Tonkin, Oxley schools, doing excellent. I applaud them. But we have some very specific districts that are turning out abysmal educational rules, and the kids aren't even there. They don't even know who is there. And I personally believe, having grown up in Wyandotte County with some of our parochial schools, which I come back and substitute in, Catholic schools, Lutheran schools, our Hispanic families are very much in favor of this because they know they can get the type of education that will make a difference in their life so that they can advance. Because I've always told kids, you get an education and it will make a difference. And I know my kids from Wyandotte will tell you that when they worked hard and they followed the rules, but we're not giving that to them in certain districts right now. And if we don't advance this, some of those districts aren't going to listen. So at the very least, this particular bill, I think, is going to shake it up in those districts that don't want to participate and are more worried about high salaries for their superintendents or their administration, where plumbers are making far more than the top level teachers. And so just my thoughts. Thank you.
I don't have any particular insight on this. I'm not on the committees. I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank Representative Johnson for being here. I know it could be tough being on a 3-versus-1 panel a lot of the times, but I've been on a lot of panels where the Republicans refuse to even show up at all. And so it means a lot that you're here and providing a different viewpoint. So I just want to say thank you for that.
I would add to that, and as Representative Johnson pointed out, we've had some real opportunities to work together on some good legislation for the state of Kansas. I will agree with Representative Hoye. I'm not on the committee, but I follow this very closely because public education is one of my top priorities in the legislature. And I will just say that I agree that public dollars should be used for public schools. Our Constitution in the state of Kansas agrees with that as well. And these are programs to just siphon money from the state general fund, whether it's a tax credit scholarship, whether it's a voucher. And if you take a look across the nation at states that have done this, they do not necessarily report higher achievement by students. There is not the same accountability for the private schools that the public schools have to attend to. They do not have to admit every student. So that makes it a lot easier for them to maybe report results if they don't have to accept special education students and so forth. I am the mother of 7. We have 90 years of K through 12 education experience. That's how long my kids attended school. And 62 of those were in Johnson County public schools. 8 were in schools out of public schools out of state. And I do have 20 years of private school experience with my own children. And we made those decisions for those children at certain times based on their individual needs and our wants and desires for them, but not once, even though when my first child attended a private school, I was a single mom on food stamps and my kids were on free and reduced lunches. I would have never expected the state to prop up my personal decision. And so when my children attended those schools and I couldn't afford the tuition, it was up to the school to decide that they wanted my child there. I participated in fundraising activities. They provided scholarships for my students to attend there. And so that's what I would like to see continue. I'm just afraid that there is abuse of vouchers and education savings accounts that are well documented across the country. And if we do have schools that are failing, public schools that are failing our children, I think the answer is to funnel more funds and do some specific rehabilitation of those schools, as opposed to creating this system that can deconstruct our public school systems completely.
We have one more education question. What can Kansas do to better attract and retain qualified teachers for our state's K through 12 public schools? And how can parents like me support policy that supports teachers?
Well, I'll go first. We've had some amazing teachers in the Capitol over the last couple of weeks. And I can tell you that at this moment, they are not feeling very supported. A lot of legislation attacks their professionalism, questions how they are teaching in their classrooms when they have multiple degrees. Most of them have bachelor's degrees. Most of them have master's degrees. Some have an additional 60 graduate hours on top of that. And we're questioning their ability to run their classrooms and putting, quite frankly, restrictions that are driving them to leave. They're leaving in record numbers. And so that was part of the push that I had to make sure that there was legislation that is supportive of teachers. The Kansas Teacher Service Scholarship will double the amount of scholarships and will create a whole lot of different pathways for teachers to come to the state and get an education and then be committed to teaching in Kansas. The teachers have asked to really get out of their way, let them continue to teach. We need to make sure that we don't pass policies that drive them away. I think that is one of the most important things we can do right now, and make sure that we recognize the good work that they are doing, make sure that we understand what the testing is actually saying, instead of trying to always say that they are not up to grade level when our standards are some of the highest in the nation. And be sure and thank them every chance that you can. Oh, and the last part about how can you and the participants on the forum this morning, how they can support legislation. If you will look up some of these numbers and make sure to email the committees and let them know that you would support a hearing. That's HB 2626, 2627, 2639, and 2671. And I don't have a bill number yet on the bill I introduced in elections, but those are 4 that are out there right now that you can email the committees and ask them to have a hearing and then to work the bill.
Hey, I'm going to go next. I came into teaching after a 31-year career in law and criminal justice field, and went back to school, got a second master's degree in education, and I loved those kids. Right now, our CAPER system, our retirement system, is one of the poorest in the country. And kids that are coming out of school, they'll ask me, well, where should I go? And I go, don't go to Kansas, because here's what I take home on my pension from CAPERS. It's sad. We deserve, our teachers deserve better than that. My daughter is a professor, a doctorate at Greenville University, and teaches elementary education, teachers all over. And she looks at the salaries and tells me, Dad, and she graduated from Piper High School, Dad, we're not giving them enough benefits. So why would you want to come back to Kansas? And I totally agree with a lot of these things. I'm a non-traditional teacher, and my classroom sometimes got a little crazy. And with that being said, I think we need some of the new innovation that is coming through different areas, Department of Education. Basehor-Linwood has an innovation academy, because we don't all think alike. We don't all learn from reading. We don't all learn from seeing, but we do learn from doing. And I think we need to incentivize both that and career technical education for our kids, because not every kid wants to worry about Mr. Johnson's boring world history class. But by gosh, they can build things, and they need those skills. So I think we're doing that. Now, last year in the committee, myself and Representative Susan Estes put into the big funding bill that each district could give a teacher a $500 bonus for COVID out of the COVID funds. And then months later, I found out that the schools many schools hadn't even given out that $500 bonus. Our goal was simply to let teachers know we cared. Well, we do care. And I'm on a good committee. There's not one person on my committee, K through 12 education, that doesn't care about kids. We may not agree about the technical issues, but I guarantee you the people that I sit with care, and we will listen. I'm not sure what is best, but we need to make sure these kids know kids. Today's my birthday, folks. So I can call anybody I want kids, because my wife gave me some cereal so I would be regular. I'd like to tell her thank you for that. She says, you're officially old, go get your ARP card. And then they gave me some Shout, so that when I spill on my tie in the sessions, I can clean myself and not look like a bum. The grandkids, I don't even want to tell you, the one that's still in the diaper brought me a big box of Depends. I'm done. Thank you.
Well, happy birthday, Representative Johnson. As Representative Poskin said, we did have teachers out, hosted them at the Johnson County delegation. We meet every Monday. And the main message that came through me was just, leave us alone. We're doing our jobs. And something important to remember, the parents of kindergartners and first graders may have never even set foot inside of their kids' school. So understandably, there is some unease and worry, but we also had a year where we may have been listening into the classroom. So for those who had remote education, I think that it's a tough time. Every employee, wherever you work, is struggling. There is a workforce crisis, and Representative Poskin mentioned the bill that would expand, or that would reduce the waiting period to 30 days temporarily, so that people retired from a CAPERS employer could re-enter the workforce. And there is a hearing on that Monday. And I know Representative Poskin, myself, Representative Schmidt, Representative Stephen Johnson, who chairs the Insurance Committee, and Representative Jim Kelly, there is a lot of bipartisan support to try to address and get creative in the way that we help with the public, at least the public portion of the workforce shortage crisis. I also think that, when times we aren't able to be in the schools as much, and there may be some concerns about what's happening, I am worried about the Parents' Bill of Rights, the hearing that we're going to have next week. I've read through the bill. There is a lot of just busy work that the bill creates for our teachers, having to create this parent portal, transparency portal, where they would have to upload every single curriculum item, worksheet, the books that they're reading in the classes. It just seems like a lot of extra work. And it also includes the training materials that any teacher would go through. And I serve on the site council as well as the PTA at my son's school, Rising Star Elementary. And one of the teachers there just informed us that he's going through a 2-year training program. It's a supplemental literacy program called The Letters that Shawnee Mission School District is doing. And, you know, our last PTA exec meeting, they only had 3 people on it. I couldn't make it myself. If we can't get folks to be showing up and where they do have the opportunity to learn what's going on in the school, I just can't imagine they're going to read 2 years worth of training materials that the teacher's going through. So I think it really, we need to just take a deep breath and focus on the achievement and what is best for the students, as well as what's best for our teachers, because they're swamped right now. There's our shortages and we're asking a lot, and they are stepping up. So I would also put a plug in. You asked what we can do, parents can do to support it. You do not have to be a parent at your local school to join the PTA. And a lot of us as PTA members, that money goes back for teacher appreciation. So let teachers know you appreciate them.
As I often do, I'm going to take like 10,000 steps back and try to broaden this a little bit. So occupations that we hear a lot about in the legislature and in the news that are having a lot of issues: teachers, childcare workers, nurses, and senior care workers, right? And then so what do those all have in common is those are all jobs that do a lot of emotional labor, and they're primarily done by women. And so I think we need to have a really clear conversation about why we don't value these jobs like we should. There are no easy solutions at this point, but I just think it's obvious that this current system that we have created doesn't value these jobs. And especially through the pandemic, it's all kind of come to a head in terms of how much these occupations are asked to do and how much they're compensated for that. So I think it's a larger issue than just teachers. My wife is a nurse, and then obviously they're all burnt out. She only gets 30 minutes for a lunch, but she's still watching a screen and she's scarfing down lunch. She hasn't gotten a real lunch break in 11 years. And so I think it's very similar for teachers in a lot of ways. So I just think we have to have a larger conversation about these types of jobs, in addition to kind of the nuts and bolts on how we can make our teachers' lives better.
How do you work within the boundaries set by committee chairs, controlled by chamber leaders, who have not allocated an adequate time in the first half of the session for robust testimony on key legislation? Citizens struggle to get testimony prepared in time between announcing bill hearing dates and the actual committee session.
Yeah, it's pretty tough. I'm going through this right now. Again, I have a bill hearing coming up on Thursday, so I'm trying to wrangle testimony together for that. I think for the most part that chairs try to do their best. I think there might be a couple of issues a session where, it gets fast tracked through in a not ideal way, but for 95% of hearings, I think bill chairs try to do their best. It's just kind of the nature of how the session goes. I think most of us, and we're not in committee leadership or legislative leadership, we're trying to get by day to day, like we have so much on our plates. Committee chairs have a bunch of additional responsibilities. So I think for the most part, they're doing our best. I think for us as representatives, individual representatives, we could do a better job of trying to keep people updated as well on what's coming up. With the decline, I think overall in journalism in state houses. I love our current press corps, but smaller than it used to be. The responsibility comes to us to a certain extent. I'm like, hey, these are the things coming up. If you want to testify, like this is the best way to do it. It's just, I think we all have to be a little bit more tuned in than we used to be.
I think Representative Xu did a great job of addressing that question, but I would also add that one of the things that I do when a constituent emails me about something that they're concerned about, I typically direct them to the committee website page that will have the committee rules, the committee assistant, and tell them that I might not have time to monitor their exact issue, but that it will likely come up in these committees, or if it's a bill that's already out there, and ask them to email the chair to have a committee, to have a hearing and to work the bill. And I always let them know that my office is here to assist if they have any questions. I have also found that committee leadership wants to have more testimony as opposed to less, and that they do make some exceptions. And I will put in for instance, I introduced a bill on Thursday that has a hearing now on Tuesday in Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development. And that's a big committee, and it's an important bill. And I have to wrangle my conferees in a very short period of time over the weekend. So I have to let them know that it needs to be in Monday at 1:30. So it's, I guess, on the representatives who sponsor bills to make sure that people know that it's out there. But in their defense, the rules are there so that they have time to make the testimony public and make sure that everybody gets a fair chance. So it's a balancing act, like a lot of things are in the legislature. And I do my best to help my constituents be heard.
Coming from somebody who was a strong advocate at the State House with a repeated presence, working for gun violence prevention, to someone sitting on these committees, I will say, I would remind folks that this is a volunteer citizen legislature, and we're also dealing with workforce issues. The revisor's office, who writes the bills, as well as our administrative staff, we're very short. Last year, my office, we had 2 assistants for 4 of us. This year we have 1. So I have 0.25 of an assistant who is working as hard as she can, but it does take time on our assistants to gather all the testimony, make sure they have the information they need, get it on there. And they do want us to be able to have a chance to look at that testimony before we have the hearing. So I know it seems like some of it's sneaky and shady, and maybe on occasion it can be, but I really do think that our chairs are trying their best to make sure that people have a chance. And sometimes hearings get moved around because we had weather events, or they realize that one of the the staff people who they needed there to testify can't make it. So there are some scheduling issues to it as well. And if you, as Representative Poskin said, if there's an issue really important to you, let your representative know, and then they can kind of look out for that and make sure you have the opportunity to submit that testimony to the committee assistant for what committee you want to be heard. We do move really fast in the 90 days, and I think that knowing that this question is there, that makes me realize we do need to do a better job of just helping the public and helping our constituents keep up with the pace, because we absolutely want you there, and we want your testimony, and we want you to be heard.
I agree on all 3 what you heard. I feel good about our committee chair. I've never been turned down if I provide the information ahead of time. I find it's difficult to stay up by reading all the materials that comes across the journal that we get every morning. I just found out during this meeting that I need to be over at Capers on Monday. Where at? Well, I should be over there pushing for that because I'm a strong advocate. But I also have 2 other hearings, and I had to get information ready. I do think COVID kind of fouled things up a little for people, because at one point we never had this. Am I correct? I mean, I wasn't here before last year, but now there are times we're trying to put senior citizens, myself included, on Zoom meetings to get on these, and they don't have the computer systems, and getting them available to testify has been difficult. I mean, just it can be terrifying to somebody that's not used to doing these Zoom meetings. I think that's impacted it a little bit, or they simply don't really want to go, at least last year, come into the building at a time when travel was being restricted. Thank you.
Okay. How can Spark funding be tailored to support early childhood special education and innovation in supporting individuals with autism?
Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah. How can Spark funding be tailored to support early childhood special education and innovation in supporting individuals with autism?
Looks like Joel is furiously doing her. So Joel would know more about this, I think, than even I would. But honestly, the legislature is slightly removed from the Spark funding process. And so I don't have any particular insight on that. I know that I believe the Spark committee does have a website and kind of a form submission process if you have requests for particular types of funding. But I don't have a much more detailed answer than that.
I'll try to help out with this. There are a few different pots that the federal government has has helped out with throughout COVID. So we had the ESSER funding that is used by our public school districts. And there was also some funding set aside for private schools. Then we have the ARPA funds that are more broadly applied. So the ESSER funds for our schools had some very specific parameters of what that money can be used for. The ARPA funds, a little bit more broad. Both have a maintenance of effort. So we can't just supplant our existing budget expenses with that money. That has to be, used in a way that would, help with capital projects and improvements to buildings, HVAC, things like that. And we have asked in K through 12 for some of our capital expenses to be reviewed by the Spark committee and to see if we could use the funding for that. So there could be requests specific for helping with autism. I really think that thinking back to Children and Seniors Committee that we heard last year and some of the programming available for individuals and children with autism, my personal opinion, the best thing we can do is to expand Medicaid and get that. A lot of the programming that is used outside of schools is a Medicaid funded programming. And so the governor's budget includes this. We would lose out on about around $1 million in our state general fund if we don't expand Medicaid this year. The federal government has given us really what I would call a carrot in order to finally do that. And I think that would be a huge boost to the individuals working with children with autism and be able to help provide those services. But it is in K through 12 education budget specifically, a lot of that programming will go through state general fund dollars, and I am not aware of any actual like COVID dollars being requested for that. So I can look into it.
On the Spark issue, I agree. I'm not quite sure on how some of these funds are distributed. I'm still learning that, but it is critical that in our preschool screenings, and I know in the DeSoto schools, we've done a wonderful job with the Parents as Teacher program, not just there. And they have developed some very strong training programs for teachers that involve dyslexia. And I firmly agree with that because the dyslexia issue, if not diagnosed by 2.5 or 3, means we're really letting down children who aren't going to have the reading skills, because reading skills start that early. And so some of the funding that needs to help with dyslexia, that also goes along with diagnosing autism. And we know that different kinds of autism reflect different behavior formats. There are some individuals I've had in class that are just brilliant, but their social skills are very difficult, and others have certain other problems. So diagnosis early, and that is preschool and in early learning programs, because that's when the corrections and the formatting so that they're going into the right program within whatever district they are in. And so I think we want to make sure that whatever pot of money that's coming out, if we don't commit to the kids early, then we're not going to have the scores later. We can blame older teacher, high school, the middle school, but if we're not giving those elementary schools the programs and the counselors they need, we're letting them down. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much to Representatives Johnson, Hoye, and Xu for their answers. I don't know that I have a whole lot more to add to that. In transportation and public safety budget, we have talked about the ARPA funds and how they can be used for the state, but again, it would be not related to early childhood there. So I appreciate Joella Hoye's understanding of that area, and we'll watch that because I fully support it as well.
What are you doing to return CAPERS to Tier 1 for all CAPERS members? Would you support a cost of living adjustment for CAPERS?
I think we would all support a COLA. Sounds like on this particular call. I haven't heard much conversation, honestly, about returning CAPERS to Tier 1. I think that's probably a couple of steps removed from where we're at in the legislature. I don't think it's a bad idea, but I just think that is a big ask after years of budget issues. But yeah, I think we would all support a COLA.
And that hearing's on Monday as well, in insurance and pensions.
Excellent. Well, and I would add that the Shawnee Mission School District has that as a legislative priority. We had asked earlier what we can do to recruit teachers and bring them to Kansas, and they have discussed the fact that taking their new employees off of Tier 1 has been difficult for them to overcome. So I do think we would support it, and it's important.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. It sounds like we all agree.
Okay, I think we have time for one more since that one went pretty quickly. Where does the legislature stand in the effort to legalize marijuana?
So, not Joel, you can do it if you want, but I would just say the House has already passed it. The Senate needs to take it up. It is hitting some roadblocks in the Senate. It sounds like they referred it to a committee that never really meets. And so the rumors are that they're trying to tie it to kind of other stuff that prevents it from being a clean bill for medical marijuana, at least. We're probably a couple of years away from legalizing recreational marijuana. I and a couple of other legislators have created the first bill to do that. I believe it's HB 2430. We are very close to getting it to be HB 2420, but that is introduced, and so we'll keep that conversation going.
I agree with Representative Xu's assessment of where we are with it. As a member of the Fed and State Affairs Committee in the House, we did a lot of work on that. Really dug into the bill and worked it well. There are some amendments got on it that I'm not crazy about, but I think it's important when given the opportunity to keep it moving and try to not let it get into the types of committees that are going to let it just die there. And the more we hear from constituents about the issue, the more I think that there is bipartisan support. But I do think it has a tough road ahead this session, and I'll continue having conversations. The big piece that has me hung up on this is equity groups and making sure that all potential entrepreneurs have an opportunity to open dispensaries and cultivate, because currently a lot of people are in jail for doing the same thing and don't have the same opportunities. And considering the fact that it is still illegal, but with the federal government, it's very hard to get capital to start something like this. And the equity groups would that I had proposed would allow would hold aside a certain number of the licenses for people who are in the equity groups, Black people, Natives, and low income in Hispanic individuals. So I'm going to keep pushing to try to make sure that as we do this, that we do it fair and give all people an equal opportunity to take advantage of this new opportunity.
I would say, go ahead. Oh, I was just going to mention that one of the things that has come out new this session were 2 constitutional amendments that would put it before a vote of the people. One for medical marijuana and one for recreational as well. And I just want to point out that the states surrounding us have medical marijuana and various laws, and that actually does impede some of our economic development and recruitment for people to live in the state.
I did vote for medical marijuana when it came up. I see no reason that we wouldn't use the benefit. My predecessor, Willie Dove, has thoroughly schooled me on the benefits of hemp and other items that I never thought I would approve of. And now I don't know why we're not working harder to promote hemp, but not recreational. I will not support a vote for recreational. But you have to understand my background. I spent 31 years in the criminal justice field, many years as an undercover drug agent. I've watched too many families that have had terrible things happen because of abuse. And so because of that and seeing things that have happened to people, the death of a family member, extended family member, I will not support recreational, and that's a personal issue. But I appreciate that some of the issues. Thank you.
And we are right at time. Unfortunately, we have many questions that we were not able to answer. But again, I would encourage you to follow up individually with these legislators. I'm going to send out the contact information. It will include the contact information for all 4 of these legislators that spoke today, as well as every single one that's speaking at future coffees. So please do not hesitate to contact them. And I just want to also send out the extension to an invitation to attend the other future coffees. Like I said, I learned something at every single one. And I believe that you would as well. And thank you again to our legislators. Thank you for taking time out on your birthday and also on a Saturday morning. Thank you.